Explícame a mí.
Good morning. I just wanted to check back in with you and let you know kind of where we're at with everything that's going on this summer that I've been telling you about. We just finished our daughter's bridal shower and that went amazing, and it was a great day. It was beautiful weather that day, so it went really well, and we had just enough people show up, but not too many that it was overwhelming. And so right now I'm sure that it's on everyone's mind what's gonna happen next school year. What's it gonna look like? And our governor in North Carolina was supposed to make an announcement today about how schools would be reopening and which plan would it be on, plan A, plan B, or plan C, depending on how restrictive things were gonna be. Once those guidelines were put in place, then the districts were going to move forward with their plans. So all the districts currently have 3 plans that they were required to come up with, but we just don't know which one it's gonna be yet. So today was the big day, and unfortunately last night around 8:30 at night, he made an announcement that they were not going to make an announcement today. So we're all sort of disappointed. I'm sure that he knows a lot more about things than we do that are going on and how those decisions are being made. So, no judgment. Personally, I think that Governor Cooper's done a great job in a very difficult situation, but it's just very frustrating right now for teachers and for the central office personnel, for the superintendents, just trying to move forward and know what next year is going to look like. I know that some districts have talked about the possibility of having the option for some teachers to teach remotely only if they were in the high-risk category, which my husband is in the high-risk category. He had a major open heart surgery last year, and he is a diabetic, so that puts him automatically in the high-risk category. I am kind of like borderline because I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 2012. I am pretty well asymptomatic right now because I'm managing my health very well, but I have to be careful. I have to think, about my immune system and how healthy I am, but I feel pretty confident that if I needed to go back to the school, I could definitely do that. And I think that my husband will go back as well, but just depending on what options are offered. If he had that option, it might be something that he would consider. So I don't know, we're just really all kind of waiting with bated breath to figure out, what types of lesson plans we need to be making. I think everyone's pretty much decided that we need to plan for online learning in one shape or form because our numbers in North Carolina are going up right now. And because of that, I don't see us going back to fully in the classrooms. But the question is, will we be able to go partially in the classroom, like a hybrid model? That's kind of what I'm thinking right now. But I don't know anything, so nothing I'm saying is official. In case you're watching this wondering, nobody knows anything for North Carolina, and I'm sure that many of you are feeling that way too in other states that you really just would like to know what's going on. But one thing I can do is work on this curriculum that I have signed up to do with Go Open NC. I talked to you a little bit about it. Now that my daughter's starting to move out and all of those parties are behind us, I really can focus on doing some lesson planning. So today I really just am forcing myself to sit down, and I enjoy lesson planning. I enjoy curriculum mapping and things like that, but sometimes it's like just making it a priority, making time to sit down and look at it. So I wanted to show you a little bit today about how I do my lesson planning. This was not my invention. The form that I'm going to show you, I am giving credit to Christy Hodges of Croatuck County Schools. When I was instructional coach there, she was a huge help to me in learning more about breaking down the standards. I already knew quite a bit, but the form that I'm showing you is unique in that it's a format that most teachers don't find to be completely overwhelming. And I don't know about you, but sometimes when we have to do things for the state level, which the Go Open NC is a digital learning initiative grant, and there's state funding for it, from my understanding. So we have to make sure that all of the boxes are checked. But this form ticks all the boxes without making it so visually overwhelming, mentally overwhelming that teachers just want to give up. So I'm going to share it with you because I think it's a great option. But you have to use obviously whatever your district is asking you to use. I'm fortunate that in my district, as long as we have 4 basic things in our lesson plans, we can pretty much use whatever format we want to use. So I'm using this in conjunction with the Go Open NC documentation that I have to do, and I'll show you a little bit about that. Once I finish these lessons, they're going to be available to all North Carolina teachers free. And I believe that that's going to be published online, so if other people can link to it, they can also get to it from other states as well. But this is a repository of free lesson plans that the team is designing, and there are teams of teachers from districts across the state working on this right now to help, especially with digital learning going into the fall. And we're supposed to design them with the thought that they could be done remotely as well as in person. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell, and I will show you more specifics now about how I'm going about planning for those lessons. So this is my first in a series of lessons that I'm designing. I'm going to do 11 total, but this just gives you an idea of what a week-long plan would look like. That's typical in my classroom. I was an ELA teacher before I was a science teacher or a social studies teacher, so I like to include a lot of literacy-based connections. So you'll see that running through these plans. But this was one on waves, and I titled it The Wild, Wonderful World of Waves to make it more interesting. And obviously this is about energy. So I did this as a Google slide presentation, which I'm finding that is a really easy way for remote learning to organize everything so the kids can find what they need on a day-to-day basis. At the beginning, I just include student-friendly questions that are basically inquiry focus for the students and the things that they're going to try to find out as they do their activities throughout the week. So this one was, how do waves work? What are their parts, and how does this connect to what we've learned about energy already? And how are earthquake waves different from light waves and sound waves? And then, do waves move differently in different substances? So then I designed a video for a welcome for my students, and I wanted to make it really fun. A quick way to capture what you're going to be teaching, but build interest in the topic before the students start. I think building interest is one of the biggest things, especially in middle school, but in all grade levels, that if the kids are interested, then you can get them to do so much more. And then as you click on these buttons, I've linked things so that the students can go to each individual activity. So there's 3 activities for that day, and this one takes them to actually a YouTube video at the beginning, and then this is a little investigation that they can do with simple materials. All they need are wire hangers, yarn, scissors, and a tabletop. So that should be something that they would be able to explore even from home. So this just gives you an idea. I've got Talk About It, which links to Flipgrid, which I absolutely love using for collaboration. And this one, I have done an intro video. It's called Playing Around with Sound Waves. So after they do the investigation, then they have to tell us 3 things that they noticed. So it's sort of like when we have our kids walk around and talk to each other, or write something down on a Post-it and share with people, or do a gallery walk. That's just another way that you can do it virtually, so that students will be more collaborative even though they're working remotely. So that's Monday. Tuesday, they have another video that shows sound waves, and I'll link that one as well down here. And then they have an investigation, another investigation. So I like to do a lot of discovery learning, but guiding students toward the topic. I wouldn't always do 2 investigations. It just depends on the topic and which parts I need them to understand. But the first day, I was just having them look at the overall phenomenon of waves. And this one, I want them to learn different patterns of wave movements. So that's why I had them do this second investigation, so that by the time we got done with it, we'd really have a lot to talk about. And these activities that I chose actually are not mine. They came from COSI, which I have given them the proper credit at the bottom here in my Google slide presentation. And then there's an online journal, and I just did this as a Google slide with a forced copy so that the students will have to make a copy when they get in here. There we go. Hold on. So I made it cute and creative, and it says what happened when you moved the rubber band string up and down compared to when you moved it side to side. How about when you changed the speed of your movement? Type your answers in the box, use complete sentences, and use specific details like a scientist, because I do a lot of claim evidence reasoning in my science classes, and talking about supporting your ideas with specific detail sentences that give evidence from the investigation or from anything you're studying. So I want to focus on that. When I grade these, I'll be looking for claim evidence reasoning, and I talk to my students about that so they're aware of the expectations. So that's Monday, Tuesday. On Wednesday, I have them take notes. So a lot of teachers, they do notes at the beginning of the week in a mini lesson. I like to do investigations and inquiry first, and then I say, okay, let's talk about why this works. Sometimes I'll make the students find why it works, and they're very motivated to search for answers to things once they've done an investigation that they think is cool. But in this particular case, I'm just giving them a PowerPoint, and I am having them use this slide player to find out about different vocabulary. In North Carolina for 6th through 8th science, vocabulary is huge, and this talks about some phenomenon in how waves work, and the fact that it's not transporting the matter, it's just transporting the energy. So that's a little story about that to illustrate that, more vocabulary. But they're going to take notes, and the way that I have set this up, they have 4 options for taking notes, so they have choice. So I have 4 different videos that show them different ways of taking notes. I don't really care how my students like to take their notes, as long as it makes sense to them, and this gives them some artistic options that they can do things digitally. If they're more digital, they can do Cornell notes. This one is pretty cool. It's actually a wall of sticky notes. So some students who are really like kinesthetic learners, or they prefer to study that way, that's a great option for them. So they have options here of how they do their notes, and they're going to share a copy. And I'm going to work on some tweaking of this, because my instructional design facilitator, she talked about how can we maybe tweak this to ensure that they're sharing and that they're able to see each other's notes and comment on them. So that's a tweak that I'm going to make. For Thursday, this is where I really get into the literacy connections. So I made a video, and I will link all of my videos down here, but this is on cause and effect text structure and how they can use it when they're reading informational text. And then I have a Newsela article, which if you don't already know about Newsela, if you are a science or social studies teacher, you really need to check it out. It's just so current. It has current events in all of their articles, and it has the ability to use different leveling of text, and you can annotate it, you can have them annotate it, you can have them answer questions right that you are creating, you can link other things to it. It's a really great thing, and it is free, although there is a pro subscription that our district purchased, so I have extra options because of that for data tracking. And then this is using a graphic organizer. And I like to use graphic organizers in science to help students think about what they're doing. This is just my little explanation for directions. So they're going to fill in the grid to show how earthquake waves in the ocean compare to light waves. So that'll go right back to that standard that I read earlier. And then they have to examine how they're the same. So this is what my graphic organizer looks like. This is much better than a simple Venn diagram, because it's really making the students think about the pieces and parts that the author specifically designed in their in their informational writing, that helps students with their own writing and their responding to things. If they can think, okay, this happened, and then that caused this to happen. And then how are these things related to each other? Because as we know, making those connections between things we're learning will really help students with their long-term memory retention and reproducing the information later so that they can use it in other ways. So that's a great graphic organizer for critical thinking. So that's my activity for Thursday. And then on Fridays, I usually do some kind of a fun game. And this week is no different. On this Friday slide, I have the weekly wrap up, which is a video that really quickly, and even in some places, I'm not exaggerating, because in some places I have fast forwarded so that it's like Mickey Mouse talking, so they can hear all the information that they learned through the week, but in fast forward. And to do that video, I simply put my information in front of me and just read from the screen so that I wouldn't make mistakes. Because if you're trying to get everything in really quickly, being able to read it right from your screen is a plus. Is a link to the teacher side, and then as a teacher you would have to decide, do I want to assign this as like something they can do on their own time, or do I want to assign it live? A lot of times this last fall I did live Kahoots, because I found that Fridays it was really nice to just unwind and do something fun with my students, and it got all of them together before the weekend. It gave me an opportunity to check in with them and say, hey, is everything okay with your house? And really tap into some of that socio-emotional support that they really needed with remote learning. So, but it's your choice with Kahoot. They have it set up so you can set it as like a homework, and they call it a challenge. And when you do it as a challenge, then the students just have to have the ID, like the code, and then the password that you give them, and then they can just go in and do it at any time. So that's a week. That's what a week looks like. Now let me talk to you about how I got to that. So this is my standard analysis form that I was telling you about that came from Currituck County Schools. I'm not actually sure where Christy picked this up. If she created it herself, she may have, because she's amazing like that. But I'm just letting you know that's where I learned it. And we did kind of a train the trainer model to share this with other teachers. We actually spent some time digging into each part of this, and we didn't teach it to teachers all in one sitting. So just be aware that as you start using this, you might need to look at the individual pieces and parts separately instead of trying to learn all of it at once. But it's actually a very simplified form. You're going to put your standard here, which is word for word, whatever standard you have to teach. And if you're integrating something, you can put the supporting standards there as well. But typically you would do one at a time, but because I'm doing this as a unit that I'm turning in, I just simplified it by putting it all on one page. And I actually included my ELA standards in mine as well. And then these are the verbs that you pull out of the standard. So you go through and you find the verbs, and as you're reading through your standard, there might be other things that you think, in order to do that verb, my students need to be able to also do this. So you can add things that are not clearly in standard language, but that you know from your experience teaching it, it's a reality for the students that they have to be able to do. And then your nouns would be your vocabulary, the things that students need to be aware of. And those words are in your standard as well, or you can add to them, like I said, from things that they might need to have as prerequisite skills. And then this is just in plain language. The way that they explained this to us was, if I was sitting down with a parent at a parent-teacher conference, and I knew that my student in question was having difficulty with this standard, how would I explain to the parent in parent-friendly, student-friendly language what the student needed to do? And that's what's going to go right here. And as you initially write down what they need to do, then you think back, okay, now what supports that, and what do they have to be able to do in order to even begin this standard? You want to put that in there also. That's really going to help you later when you're designing different instruction to meet the needs of students at different levels. So take the extra time to do that. And then ideas for how I might prove mastery. This is where your assessment comes in, and you want to have assessment of the different parts of the standard at different depths of knowledge, which depths of knowledge is a whole nother training that we could talk about in another video. If you're interested in hearing about depths of knowledge more, and I know a lot of people think that it's exactly the same thing as Bloom's, and it does have some pieces that are related to Bloom's, but Webb's depth of knowledge is about what students are able to do and to demonstrate, which as we move to NGSS is super important for us to think about. So depth of knowledge is really all about the types of thinking that students have to do in order to perform at different levels. So that's the form in a nutshell, but let me show you what one of them looks like. And I don't actually have the one right in front of me for waves, but I'm going to show you the next one that I'm working on right now. So here's my standard. I have basically cut and pasted. I knew that this next one that I'm going to do is on matter at the 6th grade level. So there's my coding, and then I just copied it straight from our standards guide. Okay, so compare the physical properties of pure substances that are independent of the amount of matter present, including density, melting point, boiling point, solubility, to properties that are dependent on the amount of matter present, to include volume, mass, and weight. And then I've also included a connected ELA standard. So I thought about what kind of reading do I want students to do to back up this information this week? And then I asked myself which standards naturally fit with that type of informational text. I decided that in order to understand and process the information that the students will be reading this week for science, they needed to think about the key ideas in the text, and they need to think about how did the author organize that information. And I think that it's mainly cause and effect. It could be other text structures, but I want to teach cause and effect, and I'm going to communicate that to my ELA teacher as well to make sure that she realizes that I am also teaching that in class. This can be helpful in a couple of ways. First of all, you're reinforcing what the ELA teacher is doing, which ELA is a huge subject, and it takes so much work for students to pass the test at the end of the year, or to show mastery, even if there's no testing, to show mastery on their important learning growth points. So it's really helpful if other teachers emphasize literacy skills to support what the ELA teacher is doing. I know that from being an ELA teacher, how valuable that can be. But also, it's important because if you have already taught it, maybe your teacher hasn't had time to get to it in ELA. So you can say, hey, I taught them how to use cause and effect text structure. So when you get to that, you have a leg up on that material. So you can go a little quickly through the beginning, unless you see that students have no memory whatsoever, which is also a possibility in middle school. So analyze in detail how a key individual event or idea is introduced, illustrated, and elaborated in a text. So we talk about key details and supporting details, which is the elaboration part. And then analyze how a particular sentence, paragraph, chapter, or section fits into the overall structure and contributes to the development. So the importance of including these is that then when you go to have students write about what they're learning, which is really important in showing their mastery and their growth, then students can kind of use that as a guideline for, what kinds of key ideas do I want to share, and what are my supporting details, and where do I place those so that my most convincing information is in the right spots and it flows well. So that's basically what we're talking about this week. Down here, I just pulled out the different verbs. So we have compare. Okay, and then I thought about it. They have to be able to sort the properties. They're going to be sorting between independent and dependent properties of matter. They have to classify which property of matter it is. They have to identify ways that they're going to be measuring those things, and also determine which type of equipment they might use to measure the different properties of matter. So when I think about a lab that would go with this, I knew my students would need to be able to do all of these things. I probably got a stick measure in there as well, which I didn't this time. And then for ELA, they need to analyze the text. They need to introduce a topic. They need to be able to illustrate a topic, elaborate on a topic. So even though this isn't a writing standard, they need to understand how the author's done that, which will later connect to their writing. They need to know how things fit into the bigger picture and how to structure their writing, or how the author has structured their writing. Over here, we've got physical property, pure substance, compound matter, density, melting point, boiling point, and then on the ELA side, ideas, detail, key individual, key event. So you can see how I'm pulling that information out, and I'm also thinking about, and there's even more down here, I'm thinking about what things I need to add that are supporting where the student should be when they come to me in 6th grade. And as you know, a lot of times we have to review what they should have done in 5th grade or even 4th grade. One of the things that I think that we sometimes forget as teachers, especially if we're teaching 6th graders, we think, oh, well, they should already have the skills that they learn in elementary school when they come to my class in middle school. But, you know, there's summer slide. There's also the fact that, I don't know about your standards, but the way my standards are set up, there are things that I teach in 6th grade that the students didn't learn since 4th grade, like the prerequisites. So the chances of them remembering that long ago, I definitely have to at least touch on it and see where my kids are. So I'm going to include those types of things. I'm going to go back through the standards and say, when was the last time that a teacher actually stood in front of them and presented this material, and what things should they have taken away from that, so that I can kind of stick those in there as prerequisites to check, at least check on where the kids are before we get started. And that can save you a lot of teaching time later on if you just take a minute to connect to prior learning.
Despicable me.